All right, so are you ready to tackle a question that's been around like forever?
Oh, lay it on me. I love a good challenge.
How do you tell a visionary from a con artist? I mean, is there even a surefire way to know?
But that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to really get into it, I think we've got the perfect case study today.
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Vivek Ramaswamy. Talk about a walking contradiction. I mean, this is a guy who just seems to defy easy categorization.
Right. He sparks so much debate. And today, we're diving deep trying to figure out where he fits on that spectrum of grifter to gifted.
And we've got a ton of material to sift through, articles, his own website, even those Wikipedia rabbit holes, which, let's be honest, can be a deep dive all on their own.
Oh, absolutely. But before we get lost in the internet, let's just lay out why Ramaswamy is such a puzzle. I mean, you've got this guy, made a fortune in biotech, but then rails against woke corporations.
Right. It's like he's straddling two worlds. And it's not just the business side. You throw in his personal life, a Hindu who often leans on Christian values while campaigning. And those policies.
Yeah. Let's just say they're not exactly middle of the road.
Definitely designed to shake things up.
So where do we even begin with someone like this?
Well, like with any good mystery, you start at the beginning.
Okay, so rewind to the early days. Classic American dream story, right? Indian American, parents are immigrants, works his way up, gets those Ivy League degrees, Yale and Harvard Law.
Textbook overachiever.
You'd think, okay, this guy's a poster child for the system, a champion of meritocracy.
But that's where the first twist comes in.
He becomes a vocal critic of affirmative action.
Yeah.
Says it undermines the very principles he supposedly embodies.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, I made it so everyone else should be able to too, without any help.
And then there's the whole business angle. This isn't some career politician we're dealing with. We're talking about a guy who founded Roivant Sciences, a biotech company.
And let's not forget, built himself a billion-dollar net worth before even thinking about politics.
So what's the motivation here? Is this genuine public service? Or is this some billionaire power move?
Yeah.
Someone who's conquered the business world and now wants to play in the political arena?
Those are the questions that make this so fascinating, right? Trying to figure out what's driving him.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit to that political journey. Runs for president in the 2024 Republican primary. For a while, he's actually doing pretty well.
Right. Polling third behind Trump and DeSantis.
But then suspends his campaign in January 2024.
Which, if you think about it, is still pretty significant. Tells you something about the GOP voters back then.
Like what?
Well, clearly there was a hunger for outsiders, for someone who wasn't part of the establishment.
And maybe a willingness to consider some pretty unconventional ideas.
To put it mildly, I mean, this is the guy who proposed raising the voting age to 25.
Yeah, that one definitely left a lot of people scratching their heads.
So, was that a genuine belief or just a calculated move to grab headlines? I mean, that's the recurring question with Ramaswamy, isn't it? Is this guy for real, or is he just a master at playing the media game?
It's like he's always one step ahead, keeping everyone guessing.
Okay, so it's not just the voting age. We've got to talk about some of his other stances, too, like climate change. Or rather, his skepticism of it.
And then there's his approach to the whole Mexican drug cartel issue, let's just say. Not exactly a diplomat.
He was advocating for military force against the cartels.
Which, even for a Republican primary, is a pretty extreme position. I mean, you had people on his own side saying, whoa, hold on a minute.
And then you add in the accusations from some critics that he's flirting with great replacement theory, which is a whole other can of worms.
Right, a conspiracy theory about white populations being intentionally replaced. Pretty dangerous stuff.
Now, to be fair to Ramaswamy, he denies those accusations flat out.
Says his focus is on restoring a sense of national identity and purpose.
Which, on the surface, sounds good, right? Who doesn't want unity and purpose? But the fact that those accusations even came up, it just adds another layer of complexity to this guy.
So we're starting to see a pattern here. Bold statements, controversial stances, and a real knack for pushing buttons.
And that's the million-dollar question, right? Is this all part of some grand vision for America, or is it just really savvy self-promotion? Like, is he genuinely trying to make a difference, or is he just building his own brand no matter the cost?
It's tough to say,
Yeah.
but to even try to answer that, I think we need to look at the ideas behind the actions. Like his whole critique of woke capitalism.
Right. What does that even mean? He's made it his brand to challenge what he sees as corporations getting too involved in social and political issues.
He says things like ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance are just a way for companies to push a liberal agenda.
And it's not just about pushing an agenda. He argues that these companies are prioritizing stakeholders, employees, customers, the community over shareholders, the actual owners of the company.
Which gets to a fundamental debate in the business world, right? Shareholder primacy versus stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah. One side says a company's only responsibility is to make money for its owners. The other side says, no, they have a responsibility to consider everyone affected by their actions.
And Ramaswamy's firmly in the shareholder primacy camp.
Basically saying, businesses stick to business, leave the social engineering to the government.
Which is kind of ironic, considering his latest venture.
You're talking about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency.
The one and only.
And just to add fuel to the fire, he's co-leading it with Elon Musk. Talk about a power duo.
I mean, those two together, headlines are guaranteed. But what are they actually trying to do with DOGE?
Their stated goal is pretty ambitious. Streamline the government, cut waste, make the whole system more efficient. Basically, a massive government overhaul.
And of course, they've been using formerly Twitter, to rally support and point out what they see as examples of government waste, which is a pretty clever way to bypass the traditional media and go straight to the people.
Oh, for sure. But it also makes you wonder about their motives, right? Is this really about reform, or is it more about getting attention and building their own brand?
It's like a reality show about fixing the government, starring Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy.
Okay, that's a show I'd actually watch. But seriously, I think a healthy dose of skepticism is warranted here.
Yeah. So we've gone from Ramaswamy's kind of idyllic beginnings to his controversial political views, and now this headline-grabbing partnership with Elon Musk. It's clear he's a force to be reckoned with, but the big question remains, is he a force for good, or is there something more, sinister going on?
To figure that out, I think we need to go beyond just what he does and look at why he does it. What are the core beliefs and values that drive him?
Right, because those are the things that shape his vision for the world, for America, and ultimately for all of us.
So we're trying to figure out, is this guy for real, or is this all just smoke and mirrors? I think to answer that, we got to look at his track record.
Right.
What has he actually done?
Okay, so let's start with those business ventures, because that's where he really built his reputation initially.
Right, like before he was Vivek Ramaswamy, political disruptor, he was Vivek Ramaswamy, biotech wunderkind.
Yeah, so he founded Roivant Sciences back in 2014, and it didn't take long for that company to make a splash in the pharmaceutical world.
They kind of came out of nowhere and shook things up. What was really interesting about Roivant was their business model. They weren't developing drugs from scratch in-house. They were acquiring promising drug candidates from other companies.
Kind of like bargain hunting for pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, exactly. Like they were these talent scouts. They'd find these overlooked drugs that had been shelved or abandoned for whatever reason.
So they saw potential where other companies just saw dead ends.
Right. It was like they were giving these drugs a second chance. They'd bring them into the Roivant fold and then develop them through a network of subsidiary companies.
That sounds pretty ingenious.
And it was remarkably successful. They launched several successful drugs, and I think their market cap is in the billions now.
So you can't argue with those results, right?
Yeah.
That takes serious business savvy.
Absolutely. It shows he has a knack for spotting opportunities that others miss. He's not afraid to take risks, and he's definitely a creative thinker. But of course, with that kind of rapid success, there are always going to be some questions asked.
Right. There were definitely some skeptics out there. I remember reading about accusations of inflated valuations, concerns about the sustainability of their business model. Some analysts thought Roivant's growth came at the expense of rigorous scientific research.
Yeah, and there were concerns that their reliance on acquisitions made them vulnerable to market shifts.
So it wasn't all smooth sailing?
Not exactly. But even with those criticisms, there's no denying Ramaswamy built something impressive with Roivant. The question is, can that translate into political effectiveness?
Yeah, because the political arena is a whole different beast.
No doubt. So let's shift gears and look at his time as a candidate. Remember, he ran in the 2024 Republican primary. He didn't win, but he definitely gained a following. What do you make of that?
I think it's important to consider the political climate at the time. There was a lot of anger and frustration, especially among a certain segment of the population.
We're talking about those who felt the system wasn't working for them.
Exactly. And Ramaswamy really tapped into that.
Yeah.
He positioned himself as the anti-woke, anti-ESG candidate. And that message resonated with voters who felt like they were being ignored or even demonized by the elites.
He was definitely speaking their language.
He wasn't afraid to make bold statements, even if they alienated some people. Like his proposal to use military force against Mexican drug cartels. That was pretty shocking.
Yeah, that was a very controversial stance. A lot of people saw it as reckless and dangerous. And his take on climate change wasn't much better. He basically dismissed the scientific consensus, which turned off a lot of voters.
It seems like he was playing to a very specific audience, maybe even a shrinking one.
Yeah, like he was doubling down on a base that felt increasingly marginalized. But that's what makes him so interesting, right? Was that a deliberate strategy to be the anti-candidate, even if it meant sacrificing broader appeal?
Well, it definitely got him attention.
Attention is currency in today's world. Whether you love him or hate him, you can't ignore him. And that brings us to DOGE, his latest project, that Department of Government Efficiency thing he's got going with Elon Musk.
It's like the ultimate power couple of disruption. Two incredibly influential figures, both known for shaking things up. What do you think is the real goal there?
Well, they've made some big promises about cutting bureaucracy, streamlining operations, making the government more efficient. Basically a complete overhaul.
Sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is. A lot of experts are skeptical about whether it's even possible. Government is incredibly complex, and there are always unintended consequences to consider.
And they've been using X to get their message out. Smart move.
Oh, absolutely. It's brilliant marketing. But again, it raises those questions about motives. Are they really trying to make the government work better, or is this just a big PR stunt?
I guess time will tell.
Yeah.
So we've got this guy, proven track record in business, mixed results in politics, and now this new venture with Elon Musk that could go either way.
It's hard to pin him down, right? He's successful, he's controversial, he's ambitious. Is he a force for good, or is it all about self-interest? I think to get closer to an answer, we need to understand the ideas behind the actions. What are those core beliefs that drive him?
All right, so we've spent the last two parts digging into Vivek Ramaswamy's life, his career, those sometimes wild policy ideas of his. But to really answer the big question, grifter or gifted debt, don't we need to understand what makes him tick?
I think you're right. We need to get inside his head, figure out what drives him. And it's not simple. I mean, he calls himself a radical pragmatist, but his ideology is this mix of like traditional conservatism, libertarianism, and something he calls cultural revivalism.
Okay, I gotta admit, those are some pretty big words. Can we break those down a little? Like, what does that even look like in the real world?
Well, you've got your classic conservative values, right? Limited government, free markets, individual liberty. Those come up a lot in his work and speeches. But then he adds this layer of emphasis on national identity, shared values, a sense of purpose that goes beyond just money or success.
So it's not just about economic freedom, it's like a cultural or spiritual thing too.
Exactly. He sees things like wokeism and identity politics as threats to national unity. Like they divide us into smaller and smaller groups, and we lose those shared values that make a society strong.
Okay, I get that. But what about this cultural revivalism you mentioned? That's where it gets really interesting, right? He seems to pull from all over the place, not just Western ideas.
Yeah, it's pretty unique. He's a Hindu who's totally comfortable talking about Judeo-Christian values, especially when he was campaigning. He'll quote the Bhagavad Gita and then turn around and quote the Bible. It's this blend of Eastern and Western thought that you don't see very often.
I can see how that would appeal to people who feel like their values are under attack, like they're losing something important in this rapidly changing world.
He's tapping into that, definitely. That yearning for meaning, for belonging, for something solid to hold on to. And he does it in a way that's smart, well-spoken, hard to just dismiss. He makes you think, even if you disagree with him.
But that's also where some people get worried, right? There's a fine line between appealing to shared values and, like, exploiting people's anxieties for your own benefit.
Oh, for sure. And there are critics who see him as a dangerous demagogue, someone who's playing on fear and prejudice to get ahead. They point to those more extreme things he says, his willingness to take controversial positions, as proof that he's not what he seems.
It's like they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Even if he starts with good goals, those methods, those tactics, could end up doing more harm than good.
It's definitely a concern. When someone is pushing ideas that are so different, so outside the norm, you have to really look closely at why they're doing it, what are the potential consequences, especially when you're talking about things like military force or changing who gets to vote.
So here we are at the end of our deep dive. Do we have an answer? Is Vivek Ramaswamy a grifter, or is he gifted? A visionary or an opportunist?
I don't think it's that simple, honestly. He's complex. He's still figuring things out, too. I think his legacy, how we ultimately judge him, it'll depend on what he does going forward.
You're right, it's too early to say for sure. But one thing's for sure, he made us think. He sparked debate. He made us question our assumptions about business, politics, even culture.
And in a world that's often so shallow, so focused on the surface, that's something. Love him or hate him, he's a force to be reckoned with.
Well said. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of Vivek Ramaswamy. Thanks for joining us. See you next time as we continue to explore the lives and legacies of the most fascinating and sometimes frustrating figures of our time.